It all started with a laugh. Chelsea Handler, standing center stage at a glitzy Hollywood charity gala, grinned wide as the room filled with anticipation. The cameras were rolling, the champagne was flowing, and the night felt ripe for scandal. Then she said it. "You know, Karoline Leavitt's husband is old enough to be her dad. I mean, what is she doing marrying her mortgage broker?" The audience erupted in a mix of laughter and gasps. Some chuckled uncomfortably, others looked away, but Chelsea basked in the attention, waving her hand like she had just delivered the joke of the century. Karoline was watching from home, dressed in her favorite green sweater, curled on the couch next to a news folder. She was preparing for the next morning's White House briefing. Her eyes narrowed. Her husband, Thomas, distinguished, silver-haired, and indeed 20 years her senior, sat beside her. He paused the TV with the remote, his face calm but unreadable. Karoline turned to him. "She thinks that's funny." Thomas smiled, softly shaking his head. "She thinks anything with applause is clever." But Karoline didn't smile back. Her fingers were already tapping on her phone. Within minutes, she posted a message to X, formerly Twitter. "Some people joke I'm building my husband's age isn't a punchline. It's part of a real-life one built on trust, vision, and values. Chelsea can keep her stage. I'm building a future within the hour." The post exploded. Karoline claps back began trending. Influencers, journalists, even rival politicians chimed in, some praising her composure, others fanning the flames of the controversy. But Karoline didn't flinch. The next morning, she walked into the White House press room sharper than ever. Her tailored navy suit gleamed under the lights, her wedding ring catching a subtle sparkle. But what caught everyone's attention was her calm, razor-sharp tone. Some people confuse age with irrelevance. I see it as wisdom, while others are throwing jokes. We're closing development deals, strengthening communities, and working on policies that affect everyday Americans. The press pool erupted in clicks and murmurs. Chelsea's joke had backfired badly, but Karoline wasn't done. She had something bigger in mind. This wasn't about Chelsea. This was about a culture of mockery, a culture that believed a young, ambitious woman couldn't love a man who also happened to have gray hair and a real estate empire. That night, Karoline's team received a call. CNN wanted her for a live interview. The topic: public shaming, gender roles, and the boundaries of comedy. Karoline didn't hesitate. "Book it. Let's end this the right way, on record." The CNN studio buzzed with energy as Karoline Leavitt stepped through the side entrance, escorted by her press aide and two Secret Service agents. The backdrop was sleek, modern black panels, a digital cityscape behind the anchor desk, and an air of anticipation that even the producers couldn't contain. Tonight's special was headlined "Love, Power, and Public Shaming, and National Conversation." But let's be honest, everyone was tuning in for Karoline. She was scheduled to face off not only with the host, but with Chelsea Handler herself, who had agreed to join the interview remotely. Karoline knew the setup was designed to provoke tension. What they didn't expect, however, was her composure backstage. An assistant dabbed powder on Karoline's cheek, but she waved them off. "Let's leave the gloss. I want America to see the real me tonight." Thomas texted her right before showtime. "You're already the smartest person in the room. Speak from that place. I'm proud of you." Karoline stared at the screen for a moment. She didn't smile. She focused. This wasn't just about a joke anymore. This was about the dismissive way society treated powerful women with personal lives that didn't fit a certain mold, and she wasn't going to let that narrative win. The host welcomed viewers, his voice smooth but eager. "Tonight, we're joined by White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt and comedian and political commentator Chelsea Handler." A joke at a gala turned into a national conversation, and we're here to unpack it. Split screen. Chelsea appeared with a smug grin, a soft-lit living room behind her. "Look," she began, "I didn't mean to upset anyone. It was a joke. She's in politics. I'm in comedy. That's how this works." Karoline didn't wait for permission. "You didn't upset me, Chelsea. You exposed something much bigger: the way people still try to undermine a woman's success by turning her personal choices into punchlines." Chelsea blinked, clearly not expecting the calm tone. Karoline continued, "My husband built a real estate empire before I could vote, and instead of seeing that as strength, you reduced it to a late-night roast. Why? Because I didn't marry a tech bro in skinny jeans." The audience in the studio gasped, then chuckled. Chelsea smirked. "So I hit a nerve." Karoline's voice stayed even. "Number, you hit a stereotype, one that says if a woman loves a man older than her, it must be transactional. That's your bias, not my reality." The host stepped in, clearly impressed by Karoline's clarity. "Do you feel, Chelsea, that the joke missed the mark?" Chelsea waved her hand. "I think people are too sensitive." Karoline leaned slightly forward, her voice sharp but never raised. "Or maybe you're just Used to laughing alone, the studio went quiet. Twitter, X, Truth Social, whatever you called it, lit up. Within seconds, the tension in the studio was now tangible. Karoline sat upright, hands folded, her posture regal yet grounded. Chelsea's smirk had wavered, if only slightly. What started as a comedy defense interview was quickly turning into a case study in composure versus condescension. The host tried to bridge the two women. Karoline, many say, "You're rising quickly in a world that doesn't often welcome young women, especially not conservative ones. Do you think your marriage is part of why you targeted?" Karoline turned directly to the camera, knowing millions were watching. "I think some people see a woman with power and assume she must be borrowing it from someone else," she said calmly. "That's the real issue here, not the age gap, not the job title of my husband. It's the idea that I can't possibly have earned this seat on my own." Across the screen, Chelsea raised an eyebrow. But Karoline didn't flinch. "Thomas didn't give me a platform," she continued. "He just supports me while I build mine." And when someone like Chelsea reduces that relationship to a punchline, she's not challenging the patriarchy, she's reinforcing it. The audience responded with a mixture of applause and hushed murmurs. Chelsea let out a short laugh, but it sounded more forced. "Now, okay, I'll give you that. It was a cheap shot, but come on, Karoline, don't act like you're not using the press attention you post about." It all started. Karoline's eyes glinted. "You mean I acknowledge my husband? Yes, I love him. That's not a scandal, Chelsea. That's called being human." The host interjected, rolling the champagne was flowing, and the night felt double standard. Chelsea, she said it. "Would you have made the same joke about a male politician with an older wife?" "I mean, what is she doing, marrying her?" But nothing came out right away. Caroline, the audience erupted in a mix of laughter and society. Some chuckled uncomfortably. Women dating younger men, but Chelsea basked in the attention, waving her hand like she had just delivered the joke of the century. Caroline punchline, was watching from home, dressed in her favorite green sweater. The audience clapped. The camera called for an older woman in the crowd, nodding with visible emotion. Caroline, her eyes narrowed. Her husband back to the host. "My marriage is not your meme. It's not an internet theory. It's a partnership." Senior sat beside her. Someone's view of what a modern woman should be then made face calm, but unreadable. Caroline turned to him. She thinks smiled slightly, sensing that the tide shaking his head. She thinks anything with applause is clever, but Caroline didn't smile back. The internet already tapping on her Caroline sharp lines. Posted a message with captions like she didn't raise her voice. "I'm building my husband's age isn't a punchline. It's part of a real life. That's what class looks like in 2025. Chelsea can." The next stage, I'm building a fast enough for Chelsea. The hour the post exploded. Caroline studio lights reignited. Trending influence shifted from entertainment to reckoning. Chelsea tried to reset, praising her composure, but the laugh fell flat. More the nervous chuckles and applause. But Caroline didn't flinch. The next morning, she walked into the White House press room, sharper than ever. Why do you think you made under the lights about Caroline's catching a subtle sparkle? As part of your everyone's attention was her calm something else. Chelsea offered a tight smile. "Confuse age with irrelevant figures. That's part of what I do. See it as wisdom. Sure, maybe it was a low-hanging fruit. I thought it was funny until Caroline decided to give a TED talk. Working on policy, her voice everyday American. But fame, it wasn't a TED talk. It was a mirror, and what you saw in it made you uncomfortable. The audience, Caroline wasn't audibly impressed. I get it, Caroline. This wasn't about Chelsea being the one. This was about a culture of mockery. A comedy doesn't believe the young, ambitious woman couldn't love women who don't share your values. That's gray hair and a real estate Chelsea shifted in her seat. Night Caroline's team received a call. CNN wanted her feminism. Live interview didn't flinch. I'm a woman who's tired of being boundaries of comedy. Caroline didn't hesitate. Bitter, loud, and this the right way. That's on not strength. That's unresolved anger. With energy, as Karoline Leavitt stepped leaned in side entrance, escorted by her press aide and two secret married a man older than me. Was sleek because he listens. He builds not tears down. And in a world where so many women are anticipation for less, I chose a partner who believes in more. That's not weakness. Headline, love, power, the crowd, public shaming, and national conversation. And while we're being honest, everyone was tuning in. I don't think the issue is my marriage. I think the not only with that I didn't ask, but with Chelsea Handler herself, who had agreed to join the interview remotely. Caroline's turned back to the camera. We're witnessing more than a debate. This is a real-time reset on how we talk about women relationships. Powder on Caroline's cheek. Online, the reaction, but she waved them off. Let Twitter lit up with hashtags. "I want America like to see the real me tonight." Thomas texted number sign H handler outclass one viral. "You're already the smartest person." Just gave the masterclass. Chelsea Handler never signed up for a journalist from the Atlantic. Didn't smile, shouting no insult. This wasn't just about a joke anymore. This was about the dismissive way society's dangerous kind of opponent, one who doesn't need to raise her voice to win. Caroline, and she wasn't going to let narrative on its head, not just defending welcome viewers his voice but exposing the subtle misogyny. Tonight we're joined by White House press secretary. She wasn't just surviving the moment. She was political commentator Chelsea Handler segment at a gala turned into a national conversation, and we're here to unpack just about two women exchanging a smug grin, a deeper cultural conversation behind her look. Here, one that touches on age, marriage, didn't mean to upset anyone. It was a joke. She's in struck a nerve. Why do comedy? That's how Karoline didn't hesitate. Karoline, because the rules keep changing. Women upset me. Chelsea, you exposed something, but also not intimidating. Still try to undermine a woman's success, but only if the match looks like a Hollywood script. And when we step outside those bounds, not expecting, especially by those who claim to stand for him. My husband built a real estate empire. You think I don't stand for him? And instead of seeing that as strength, you reduced it to a late surgical. I think you stand for a version of one that excludes women like me. The silence in the audience in the studio. Reverend, you say I married my husband, so I hit a nerve. Money or safety state, even number you hit a stereotype. Same reason if a woman loves a man older than her, it must be transactional. And I've always admired not my reality because I come from a family that didn't have much. Chelsea tried to interrupt Chelsea, but Karoline kept going her tone now. And I think people are too sensitive. Karoline leaned slightly forward. I wasn't born into the elite. Never raised, or maybe you're just. And when I met someone laughing alone in the studio from the ground up, I didn't see a social whatever you called it. I saw it within seconds. The tension in the studio was now tangible. Karoline sat upright, maybe that scares people more than anything. Grounded Chelsea that a woman could choose only slightly what started without asking permission from a culture obsessed with rebellion study and composure versus condescension. The host tried to bridge rich coming from someone who's profited off politics. You're rising quickly in a world that doesn't often profited off comedy. Young women, especially not conservative. What are we building? Do you think your marriage mockery or meaning the host Karoline forward eyes wide ladies and gentlemen, knowing millions just a debate anymore? This is a reckoning social media power and assume she must be borrowing the segment of someone else. She said calmly, "That's the real issue here, not the age gap, not the job title of my husband. This was an idea that I can't possibly have earned this seat on my own across the screen. 3 hours, even celebrities. But Karoline didn't conservative figures praised Karoline give me a composure while some liberal influences admitted Chelsea got caught. And when someone like Chelsea, someone who came relationship by the end of the segment, not challenging the patriarchy, Karoline Leavitt reinforcing it. Just defended her responded with a mixture of applause and hushed murmurs. Chelsea let out a short laugh, but it sounded more forced now. Okay, I'll give you that. It was a cheap shot, but come on, Karoline, don't act like you're not using the press attention you post about. Which America views relationships, ambition, and womanhood, and for the first time in a long time, Chelsea Handler didn't have a punchline after the broadcast ended. The studio lights dimmed and applause slowly faded, but the tension clung to the air like smoke after a fire. Karoline stepped off the stage with poise, her heels clicking against the studio floor. Chelsea lingered behind, silent, seemingly caught off guard by the shift in audience sentiment backstage. In the green room, things took another unexpected turn. One of the younger production assistants approached Karoline, her voice low and a bit shaky. "Miss Leavitt, I just wanted to say thank you. My boyfriend's 12 years older than me, and I get weird looks all the time. What you said, it meant something." Karoline smiled, gently placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Don't let the noise drown out your own voice. You know your heart better than anyone." Behind them, Chelsea entered the room flanked by her manager and a PR rep. The room stiffened. Karoline turned ready for another jab, but Chelsea paused, her usual bravado muted. She looked at Karoline for a beat, then finally said, "You're good. I didn't expect that." Karoline simply nodded. "I didn't come to surprise you. I came to speak the truth." Chelsea's expression flickered, half defiance, half something else. "You should be on late-night TV," she muttered almost to herself. "Funny," Karoline replied with a small smile. "I was just thinking the same about you. If only you'd let people speak." Before the punchline, the exchange was short but meaningful. For once, Chelsea didn't have a comeback. Instead, she walked past Karoline and out of the room without another word. Within minutes, a leaked clip from the green room, Karoline speaking to the production assistant, began circulating on social media. The public response was overwhelming. One viral tweet read, "Karoline just exposed the hypocrisy in the loudest way by staying calm." News outlets ran headlines like, "Karoline wins the culture clash, Handler's jokes fall flat against Leavitt's reality real estate," and "Real talk, Karoline Leavitt's moment." Meanwhile, Karoline's husband, watching from their home in New Hampshire, texted her, "You didn't just defend us, you elevated us." Proud doesn't even cover it. Karoline stated the message, her heart full. This wasn't just about Chelsea anymore. It was about every young woman who had ever been told she was too young, too ambitious, or too traditional, and Karoline had just shown them that with grace, grit, and truth, none of that matters. The following morning, Karoline woke up to a storm of notifications. Overnight, her words had become a cultural flashpoint on political shows, Twitter, and Instagram Reels. One moment in particular was playing again and again, her looking straight at Chelsea Handler and calmly saying, "My husband didn't marry a joke, he married a fighter." The line had struck a nerve. Conservative commentators celebrated her takedown. But more surprisingly, even some apolitical voices had taken notice. A popular lifestyle influencer posted a TikTok saying, "I don't care what side you on, that woman held her ground with class." Chelsea's team tried to contain the fallout. They issued a short tweet claiming it had all been satire, and that people need to learn to laugh more, but the internet wasn't laughing. The tide had turned. The hashtag #NotTooYoung started trending, originating from Karoline's remark about age not defining worth. Thousands of women, especially those in age-gap relationships or working in male-dominated industries, shared their stories. One tweet read, "I'm 26, my husband is 40, and yes, he respects me more than any guy my age ever did. Thank you, Karoline." Karoline sat at her kitchen table sipping coffee, her husband across from her scrolling through headlines. "Did you see this one?" he asked, reading aloud. Karoline Leavitt redeems Grace under fire, handle as ageism backfires. She raised an eyebrow. "Grace under fire, I like that." He leaned in, half joking. "So when's the book tour start?" Karoline laughed. "One war at a time." But deep down, she knew this wasn't just about clapping back at Chelsea. It had become something larger, a moment where she wasn't just defending herself or even her marriage, but representing a much broader resistance against dismissive labels, outdated expectations, and shallow media jabs. By noon, Fox News called her, wanted her on the angle. Then came an email from the Daily Wire and one from a best-selling author who wanted to co-write something titled Young, Married, and Misunderstood. Karoline's team was already sorting through opportunities, but she remained grounded. When her assistant asked how to respond to the offers, she simply said, "Tell them I'll talk when I'm ready. Right now, I want to keep building something that lasts longer than applause." Her husband smiled. "That's why I'm married you." Karoline nodded, eyes clear. "And that's what Chelsea will never understand." By the end of the week, Karoline Leavitt was no longer just a trending name. She had become a symbol in conservative circles. She was hailed as the woman who stood up to Hollywood hypocrisy. But even outside of politics, something was shifting. Her story had pierced the usual noise, and people from all walks of life were paying attention. One afternoon, Karoline found herself invited to a podcast hosted by a centrist millennial voice. "You're the most talked about woman this week," the host opened, and it started with a single insult about your marriage. "What do you think that says about where we are as a culture?" Karoline leaned forward, choosing her words with care. "I think we've let ourselves believe that youth equals ignorance, and that if you don't fit someone's mold, if you marry differently, think differently, speak differently, you're fair game for ridicule. But I won't play by those rules. I married a man who builds things, and I intend to do the same." Clips from the podcast exploded online. One comment under a reel read, "She didn't just defend her marriage, she gave us permission to be proud of our choices even when they don't look like the world expects." Even critics had to admit Karoline wasn't just reactive, she was strategic. Behind closed doors, Chelsea handlers team debated damage control. "Should we double down, ignore it, apologize?" one producer asked during a crisis meeting. Chelsea, visibly tired of the backlash, muttered, "I made a joke. I didn't expect her to launch a movement." Back at Karoline's office, a young staffer approached with a folder, a few more requests for interviews, plus a draft op-ed if you want to speak directly to the public. Karoline flipped through it and paused. "No," she said, "I'll write my own. This isn't about clicks, it's about clarity." That evening, she sat at her laptop and began typing to every young woman who's been underestimated, to every wife whose marriage has been womanhood, and for every first time in a long time, Chelsea Handler didn't have a punchline after the broadcast ended. The studio lights dimmed and applause slowly faded. The next morning, home to the air like smoke after a fire. Karoline stepped off the stage with poise, her heels clicking against the studio floor. But noticeably more careful, Karoline seemingly redefined the rules of engagement. This wasn't about a talk show jab anymore. It was about resilience. Grace took under fire. Unexpected, and the audacity to build something real in a world addicted her voice low and a bit shaky. And as her husband, "I just wanted to say thank you. My boyfriend's 12 years older than me, and I get weird looks all the time. What you said meant something." Caroline smiled gently, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Had happened." "Don't let the noise drown out your own voice. You know your heart conservative circles behind them." Chelsea entered the room flanked by her manager. Wasn't just shared by politicians or pundits. It was reposted by young professionals, mothers, and even unexpected celebrities. Muted, she looked at Karoline. "You don't have to agree with her politics to admire the way she handled that hit." Grace. Karoline simply nodded. "I didn't come to surprise Caroline off guard." Chelsea's expression flickered half the shadows of something else. "You should be on late night TV." She muttered almost to herself. "Funny." Caroline told her, "You turned it into a platform." "I was just Chelsea Handler was still simmering beneath the surface, though she hadn't spoken publicly short, but meaningful for once. Chelsea didn't have a comeback. This wasn't supposed to past Caroline. She reportedly told, "Without another word, she's turning it into into a TED Minutes
Talk.
A leaked clip
Still,
from
Chelsea couldn't
Caroline's
resist one last
to the
attempt
production
to
assistant
salvage her
began
ground.
circulating
She
her
took to
own
social
show
media.
and
The
issued a
public
statement
response was
dripping with
overwhelming.
sarcasm.
One viral
Well,
tweet
apparently
read,
I
Caroline
triggered
just
America
exposed
by
the
pointing out
hypocrisy
something
in the loudest
obvious. Sorry,
way
I
by
didn't know
staying
marrying a millionaire
News
developer
outlets
twice
ran
your age is
headlines
now a
like,
moral
Caroline
virtue.
wins the
didn't
culture
flinch. In
clash
fact, she
handle
leaned
jokes
into
full
it that
flat
night
during
against
a televised
Leavitt's
interview with a
reality
moderate news
and real
anchor.
talk
She
Caroline
responded
Leavitt's
calmly.
moment. Meanwhile,
Let's set the
Caroline's
record straight. My
watching
husband
home
isn't
in
just
New
a
Hampshire.
developer
Her,
is a man who
defend us.
believes
You
in
elevated
building
us
futures,
proud,
doesn't
not
even
tearing
cover
people
Caroline.
down.
And if that
the
message
message
someone's
hurtful,
comedy
this
routine,
wasn't just
maybe
about
the punchline
anymore. It was about
every young woman who had ever been told she was too
sharp when you're not
ambitious or
Caroline added
traditional.
that
Caroline had just shown social media lit up once again. This time
none
it
of
wasn't
that matters.
outrage. It
The
was
following
admiration.
morning,
Even late
woke
night
up to a
hosts who
storm of
previously mocked
notifications
Caroline
overnight. Her
began
words
treading
had become
carefully
a cultural
afraid
flash
there
point
might be
on
next.
political shows,
On the
Twitter,
wrong
and
side
Instagram
of the
reels.
well-articulated
One moment in particular
storm,
was
meanwhile,
playing again
young
and again.
women
Her
started
looking straight at
messaging
Chelsea
hey
Handler
teen
and
college
calmly
students,
saying,
working
"My
moms,
husband
political
didn't marry a
independence. They
joke.
weren't
He married
reaching
a
out for
fighter."
political
The
endorsements.
line had
They were
struck a
reaching
nerve
out
because they saw
conservative
themselves
commentators
celebrated
Caroline
a takedown.
underestimated,
But
mocked,
more
and
surprisingly,
yet
even
still
some
standing
analytical
tall of
voices
one
have
message
taken
read.
notice of
I never
popular
liked
lifestyle
politics until
influencer
now,
posted
but
a
seeing
TikTok
someone like
saying,
you
"I
handle
don't care what
cruelty with
side you are on
composure,
that woman
listening
held her
Caroline's
ground with
campaign
class."
office noticed
Chelsea's
the spike
team
in
tried to
volunteer.
contain the fallout.
Sign-ups,
They
she
issued a
wasn't
short
just
tweet
defending
claiming it had
herself
all been
anymore.
satire,
She was inspiring
and that people need to
people,
learn
and
to
she knew
laugh
it was
more.
just
But
the
the
beginning.
internet
That
wasn't
final
laughing
wave
came
came
not
out
with
with
a
a
shout,
hashtag
but with a standing
number.
ovation.
Not too
Caroline
young
had been
started
invited
trending
to speak at a bipartisan
Caroline
women's
about
leadership
age,
summit
not
in
defining
Atlanta,
a
a
place
place
where
where
political
political
especially
affiliations
those
usually
in
collide
age-gap
relationships.
Yet on this
Working
day,
in
she
male-dominated
stood center
industry,
stage, not as a
shared
partisan
stories
warrior,
one tweet,
but as a woman
I'm
who had
26,
weathered
my
a storm,
husband is 40,
and walked out
and
stronger.
yes,
She
he
looked
respects me.
across the room
More
than
than
any guy my
Many had
age
come
ever did.
expecting
Thank you,
confrontation
Caroline.
or defensiveness.
Caroline
Instead,
sat
she
at her
began
kitchen
with quiet
table
sipping
sipping
coffee.
I was
Her
told my
husband
marriage
from
was
his
a joke,
scrolling
that the
through
man I
headlines.
love made me a
Did you
symbol
see
of
this
something
one?
outdated.
He asked,
something
reading
weak.
aloud,
But let me
Caroline
tell you
Leavitt
who he is.
redeemed
The man
grace
who
under
believed
fire
in me
handle
before
his
the
ageism
headlines, who
backfires.
encouraged me to speak
She raised an
louder when the
eyebrow,
world
grace
wanted
under
me
fire,
quiet,
and
who
like
stood
that.
beside me when
He
others
leaned in half
pointed and
joking.
laughed. Silence,
So
not
when's the
awkward,
book
but
to
reverent,
start?
she continued.
Caroline
If that's
laughed
something
one
to
more
mock,
at a
then
time.
maybe the jokes.
But deep
on
down,
those
she
who don't
knew this wasn't
understand
just
what
about
real
clapping back
partnership
at Chelsea.
looks
It
like.
had become something
Reporters
larger
in the
moment
back
where she
scribbled
wasn't
like
just
mad. Some
defending
looked up
herself
visibly
or even her
surprised,
marriage,
even
but
those who had been
representing a much
skeptical now
broader
found it
resistance
difficult to
against
dismiss her
dismissive
labels
labels,
outdated
outdated wasn't just
expectations.
optics.
This
Shallow
was
media
conviction
jabs
as she
by
left the
noon
stage.
Fox
The
News
applause
reporter
wasn't
her
just
on the
loud,
angle.
it was
Then
sustained.
came an email
Chelsea
from the
Handler
Daily
didn't
Wire
respond
and
publicly
one from a
again.
best-selling
Some say her
author
team
who
advised
wanted to
silence.
co-write
Others
something.
suggest she
Titled
simply
Young
realized
Married
there was
and
no
misunderstood
comeback. Her
Caroline
punchline had unraveled.
team was
into
already
a
sorting
movement
through
she hadn't
opportunities,
intended
but she
to
remained
start.
grounded
Caroline
when her
did.
assistant
Glowed,
asked
she
how to
went back
respond
to
to the
work.
offer.
Policy
She simply
meetings,
said,
local
"Tell
outreach
them I'll
community
talk when
panels.
I'm
But
ready
something
right
had
now."
shifted. She
I want to
wasn't
keep
just
building
another
something
rising
that
figure on
lasts
the
longer
right
than
anymore.
applause.
She had crossed a
Her
cultural
husband
threshold,
smiled.
speaking
That's
to
why
Americans across divided eyes
clarity
and
through
that's what
restraint
Chelsea
through
will
strength.
never
In
understand.
one of her
By the end of
closing
the week,
interviews,
Caroline
when asked what the
Leavitt
incident
was no
with
longer
Chelsea
just a
had
trending
taught
name.
her,
She
she
had
had
become a
smiled
symbol
gently
in
in reply.
conservative circles.
When they
She was hailed
underestimate
as the
you,
woman
when they
who
reduce
stood
you
up
to
to
a
a
joke,
joke, don't answer with anger.
But even outside of politics,
with purpose, they
something was
won't know
shifting.
what
Her
to do with
story
that.
had
And that's
pierced the
exactly
usual
what she had
noise,
done
and
from a
people
mockery
from
to a
all walks
moment
of
of
life were
influence.
paying
Caroline
attention.
Leavitt didn't
Afternoon,
just survive
Caroline
the
found
insult. She
herself
transformed it into a
invited to
defining chapter.
podcast
Thanks for
hosted by
watching
a
surprising
centrist millennial
Don't
voice.
forget
The
to
most
subscribe
talked about
for more
woman this
powerful
week. The
moments
host
where
opened,
words
and it
spark
started with a
change
single
and
insult
character
about your
conquers
marriage.
criticism.
What do you think that says about where we are as a culture? Caroline leaned forward, choosing her words with care. I think we've let ourselves believe that youth equals ignorance, and that if you don't fit someone's mold, if you marry differently, think differently, speak differently, you're fair game for ridicule. But I won't play by those rules. I married a man who builds things, and I intend to do the same. Clips from the podcast exploded online. One comment under a real read: she didn't just defend her marriage, she gave us permission to be proud of our choices even when they don't look like the world expects. Even critics had to admit Caroline wasn't just reactive, she was strategic behind closed doors. as Chelsea Handler's team debated damage control. Should we double down, ignore it, apologize? One producer asked during a crisis. Meeting Chelsea, visibly tired of the backlash, muttered, "I made a joke. I didn't expect her to launch a movement back at Karoline's office." A young staffer approached with a folder, a few more requests for interviews, plus a draft op-ed if you want to speak directly to the public. Karoline flipped through it and paused. "No," she said, "I'll write my own. This isn't about clicks, it's about clarity." That evening, she sat at her laptop and began typing to every young woman.